I think if you're new to Bitcoin, the best way to think about hash rate is just as a measurement. So when everybody has used a USB drive or a flash drive or memory stick to maybe you have a presentation somewhere or you got to bring something somewhere to another computer. And the way we measure that is in megabits, gigabits, and terabits, right? So it's a way to measure how much memory space you have on that flash drive. Well, hash rate is just a way to measure the amount of computational power that's going into the Bitcoin network. So we don't have to make it too difficult. And it's the easiest way to think about it is when the hash rate is higher, you have more computational power being contributed to the network. And when the hash rate is lower, you have less computational power being contributed to the network.
And so I think that's a great way to kind of introduce the idea. And so for people who that makes sense, the idea that hash rate is more computational power or less computational power. Can you go into a little bit of the mechanics of Bitcoin in the sense of when someone's contributing computational power, what are they computing? What are they working on or towards?
Yeah, so the tool that miners use is called an application specific integrated circuit. And you might have heard of it called as ASIC miner. And what that means is that it's not a computer. So, what's really going around today is you hear a lot about AI and you have these high compute models. And those are actually computers that need to do multiple things in order to perform those computations. But when it comes to Bitcoin mining, that application specific is just mining Bitcoin, which is just taking guesses over and over and over again at a tune of trillions of guesses per second. And whoever makes the correct guess first wins the block reward. And that block reward creates profit for the producer. So that's why they generate hash rate. They generate hash rate in order to profit. And that's where the fundamentals of Bitcoin really fall onto the natural laws of economics. And what's really amazing about the Bitcoin network is you hear some people say, well, what happens if they come up with, some AI computer or some quantum computing machine? Would that break Bitcoin? Will that cause a problem in Bitcoin? And the answer to that is, or at least my answer to that is, Bitcoin is already the quantum computing ledger. When you look at the amount of computing power that goes into Bitcoin, it exceeds that of Google and every Amazon, every form of or presenter or hoster of computing power. If you add all of them together, it's just a drop in the bucket of water when compared to the amount of computing power that goes into Bitcoin. And a lot of that goes back to that ASIC creation where the computer itself is designed simply to mine Bitcoin and do nothing else. Whereas other compute power has to do multiple tasks to perform what it wants to do. With a Bitcoin miner, it only hashes, it only takes guesses, it only contributes to the network and does nothing else. So that's a really important concept that there's this sole focus on what a Bitcoin miner can do, and it's not distracted by anything else.
Yeah. So let me see if I can kind of wrap this all up. There's a bunch of people on the Bitcoin network. They're sending messages that contain transactions back and forth. A miner, someone who's in the business of aggregating all those transactions to produce the set of transactions for a given time. We call those blocks. And with that set of blocks, part of the way that the Bitcoin network verifies that these are legitimate is, as you say, they're taking guesses at what are effectively cryptographic solutions to the big puzzle that is Bitcoin, saying, look, I, the miner, have looked at past transactions. I've looked at the state of the network, and I'm proving to you that I've verified everything that everybody's saying is true. And to show you that I've done that work, I am spending my actual money on electricity and on ASICs. I won't call them computers from now on ASICs to try to guess these things that add up to what, CJ? So we're trying to find something. You said we're taking a guess. What are we taking guesses at, and what is the answer that we're looking for?
Yeah, so it's just a hash, and you're looking for the correct hash to match the block in order for your block template, the transactions that that specific miner includes in that block template, to add to the blockchain itself. Now, what's really interesting is that some of your listeners probably heard the idea of proof of work. And this is the work that's being done. This is the proof of work that's being done. It's not just about gathering those transactions in the mempool and adding them to the block. It's doing it in a way that is validated by the consensus mechanism, which is that proof of work algorithm. Now, what's really interesting is that the more and more people who try to do this, uh, there's something called the difficulty adjustment. And this ties into Bitcoin being engineered money. So a lot of people learn about Bitcoin, and the first thing they learn is, well, there's only 21 million coins. It's absolute digital scarcity. And then they stop there. But the next step of learning about the engineered components of Bitcoin is the difficulty adjustment, because the difficulty adjustment, its job is to do one thing, and that is to make sure that those miners who are blocking together those transactions to add to the blockchain itself are only able to add blocks every 10 minutes. So the difficulty adjustment targets a 10-minute block time. Now, that's really important because as hash rate goes up and more computational power is contributed to the network, blocks can be found at a faster than a 10-minute pace. And what happens is over the course of 2016 blocks, the difficulty will adjust, which is roughly 2 weeks. So roughly about every 2 weeks with 10-minute block times, we get a difficulty adjustment. And if the block times are lower than 10 minutes, the difficulty will increase, making it harder, increasing the cost of production for miners to earn that Bitcoin block. And vice versa. If blocks take longer, the difficulty will reduce, making it easier and lowering the cost of production to find those Bitcoin blocks. And all this ties into the economics, which we'll get into later. But that proof of work concept with the 21 million absolute finite supply and digital guaranteed scarcity, plus the difficulty adjustment, those are the two magic makers that makes Bitcoin what I say the first real form of money. We've used quite a bit of things to stand in as money, most notably gold, and it worked great. But Bitcoin works better because it's engineered. And I like to say, if you could carve a bow out of a tree, and you're going to have a pretty good bow. But if you engineer a bow and you create it in a factory, that bow is always going to be better and more powerful than one carved from a tree. So that's what we're looking at here. Gold is that old money that did its job and taught us what the characteristics of money really are. And then Bitcoin comes in with its engineered design, with its strategic design to empower savers, to empower we the people by leveraging the natural laws of economics to work for us rather than against us.